Welcome to Moon Me, an astrology podcast where we explore astrology, tarot, psychology, and astrocartography. With your hosts, Roxy and Izzy, we dive into the connections between the stars and the self. Hello and welcome to Moon Me, an astrology podcast. I'm Roxy.
And I'm Izzy.
And this is episode 3. Today we're going to be talking about the marvelous and wonderful and often quite scary Pluto. So let me hand it over to Izzy a little bit. Tell me what comes up for you when you think of Pluto, the energy of it.
Wow. So, as a Scorpio stellium person, so I've got lots of Pluto energy. When I think of Pluto, I think of like off the bat, like transformation, drastic changes, um, sometimes difficulty, losses, losing maybe everything and gaining it back, or even just like inner transformation and just like transforming dynamics. It doesn't have to be so, scary. It
Mm-hmm.
could be, it could involve, kind of just changing the way you see things, changing your approach to things, but it's change in the sense that it's quite drastic. Um, I think of like something like getting married, getting divorced, having a child, transformations that like are long lasting.
Mm,
Um, and just
absolutely.
also just like darker topics, more complicated topics.
Mm,
Um, like taboo topics, because it is the co-ruler of Scorpio. So and secrets, revealing what's hidden from us, like kind of getting, what's it called? Like taking off the rose-colored glasses, like seeing things for what they really are.
the hidden.
Um, like yeah, a lot of it's very revealing. It's really exposing and it has a lot to do with vulnerability.
Mm,
What about
absolutely.
you? What do you think of when you think of
So, of
Pluto?
course, all the things you mentioned, transformation, rebirth, challenges, it's change on a fundamental level. I personally associate Pluto with Kalima, the Hindu goddess of death and destruction, with the purpose of living authentically and growing and being our truest selves. I think Pluto certainly guides us there, where Saturn teaches us lessons in discipline, Pluto teaches us how to surrender. Um, but more than that, I associate Pluto with like Hades, um, in Greek mythology, the god of the underworld. Um, and in that sense, what I mean is that Pluto represents a journey. And very often it's a journey through some of the darkest times, some of the less, what's the word? It can be scary in the sense of we think of darkness as unknown. And Pluto really represents that which is unknown, of course, until it is known, until it is unhidden. Not that that's a word, but the concept is there. It's that reveal, let's put it that way, of that which is true, you know?
Yeah, it also has a lot to do, I feel like
Mm,
power dynamics. Not in the way that Saturn does of like, oh, authority. It's just more just like certain power struggles, like asserting yourself, knowing when to assert your dominance and when not to. I don't know, what do you think of that
yeah.
also?
Absolutely, absolutely. I was also thinking about what you said earlier about how it's like these big life changes that affects you for a very long time. And I think
Very
that's very
profound.
much, yeah, profound. It's life altering in the sense, and I think it has something to do as well with the slow moving nature of Pluto, right? If you think about how slow it moves, it does tend to have a bigger life impact. And I think on the
It's
collective as
more
well.
like like I said,
Mm,
long-term changes. Long
absolutely. It's similar to Saturn in that way, that it's really a collective energy, but for the individual, it has long-term effects. Would you say that?
Yeah, for sure. Like it often just involves like a complete transformation. Like wherever it's transiting, for example, is like gonna be like a complete transformation in that area of life. Like you're from start to finish, it's gonna look so different. And it always does. Like I think about, the Pluto transits that I've gone through, which is not many. Because it's such a slow moving planet, but like it's so impactful. It is so, 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 so impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's impactful to the collective, right? We're all born under the same Pluto sign, not all of us, what I mean in a certain generation, right? Pluto takes about what, 12 to 20 years to move into a new sign.
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
Right. So everyone born in that time period would then have the same sign, Pluto. But where it is in your chart can, I guess, impact you in very different ways. How do you think Pluto relates, more to the individual in their chart?
I think it's important to look at like, yeah, where Pluto is in their chart. And I think on an individual level, it shows maybe where they could have like an area of life or like parts of life where they could have like a really serious impact on others, maybe.
Hmm.
So like I think of like people who have, say, Pluto in the fourth house. Like they might go through a very challenging childhood, where their sense of home might be threatened,
Hmm.
or they might have a very intense relationship to their home that they grew up in. Um, but then it often indicates like transformation through those experiences. So like maybe they help others heal those kind of like difficulties, right? Or
Hmm.
like Pluto in the 11th house, like I have this one, like it could look like, leading a community, maybe being a figure that is a bit polarizing in a community. It could show where you have some polarizing energies. It can show where you are, the things that you're intense about, right? Um, it can show where you might experience a lot of power struggles, power dynamics, maybe disappointments and lessons.
Hmm.
Um, but not in the way that like with Saturn where it's like things I feel like the Saturn placement shows like where things don't come naturally to you and you have to learn them. I feel like with Pluto it's more like there's just like a lot of intensity around like a certain theme in life or like a lot of maybe betrayal or disappointments or like just mm,
Hmm.
intense situations around that like
Yeah,
like
I
Pluto,
think it like
Pluto in the
takes
10th house,
place.
there could be a lot of like conflict in work, like,
Hmm.
um, maybe you have a certain position and people don't like that and they want to like, you know, tear you down from that. You know what I mean?
Mm. Oh, yeah. And I love that. It's true. I think very much Pluto is intensely personal, but it's also the way others perceive you and interact with you, for sure. In some ways, I feel like Pluto's a bit of a mirror, similar to Scorpio energy, you know, where that's very much the case. I also think it's just where you're gonna see a lot of change, you know. If you have Pluto in your first house, for example, throughout your life, a big theme might be that your identity goes through a lot of transformations. You might start off in one place and look back and go, I cannot believe how much I've grown, or how far I've come, or how much things have changed. And I think it's very much depicted by which house it's in. Depending on the house, is where you're going to see most of that change.
Yeah,
And I
like
guess, sorry to intercept you there, but I also guess that the way it relates to the rest of your chart and the planets it's with in the house or in the sign can also represent perhaps how intense that change might be, or how easy, quote unquote, or how difficult that might be. But yeah, I think it's a deeply
Yeah, like
part.
if it's conjunct sun, for example, it's like the person could just have a very strong presence, have like an intimidating presence, even like a strong. I was actually I was watching was it YouTube or TikTok? I can't remember. This woman was talking about her experience. Like having Pluto in her first house conjunct her sun. And she was saying like people my whole life have either like despised me or loved me. There's no in between. And I just put, and she was like, I just put people off. And I could so see that. I mean, I don't have Pluto in my first house, but it's definitely like the planet it's near. Like if it's conjunct Venus, maybe like the way the person approaches relationships could be kind of intense. It'll bring like intensity to that side of the character, to that side of the person's like personality for sure.
So considering that we are Cap risings, that would put Pluto in our 11th house, yes? In Scorpio, which is
Yeah.
its modern ruler essentially. Can you think of any examples or any ways in which it's affected you in terms of 11th house?
Yeah, I mean, I think more so when I was younger, I feel like in groups, like I fit in, but like, I was very concerned about like doing what was the right thing. And like loyalty was always really important to me. And like, I don't know, I wasn't afraid to like expose someone in the group for who they really were. And that got me like a lot of enemies when I was younger.
Mm,
Like in high school, like I wasn't disliked by everyone, but there were people that didn't like me, and it was
mm,
known.
mm,
Like I feel like yeah, and sometimes even now I feel like my presence in a group, it's like it could be a bit off-putting, I feel like, depending on the group. Like I feel like um and just friendship dynamics like sometimes were so intense, and then like there would be like falling out, and like having to like rebuild that was hard, but more when I was younger. I think that it was really because like as Cap Risings, Pluto for 16 years basically was transiting our first house.
mhm,
So our identity, ourselves, like we just went through so much change. And I feel like during that period, I had a lot more of that,
mm,
especially in the earlier like part of the transit. Um, I think now socially things are a lot better, totally different. But I had to go through a lot of changes to like, and ups and downs and turmoil to like figure that out, you
mm.
know. What about you?
Yeah, I think, the 11th house for me, I mean, Pluto in the 11th house showed up in the sense of having a lot of different groups of friends that contrasted each other quite a bit. Couldn't really mix them. Also, I feel like I changed a lot of friendship groups throughout my life, really, not just when I was younger. Um, my friendship groups, my communities have changed partly because I've moved all over the world, but quite profound differences between the people that I've connected with. I think connection is important to me, but coupled, for example, with my Aquarius stellium, it has always felt difficult to fully immerse into groups. So for me, I think Pluto in the 11th house showed up in the sense of I'm there and people know me, and but there's this kind of veil or block or wall between me and them. And that's always been a theme of mine. But as I have come to terms with some of those Pluto energies, I think that I've broken down some of those barriers as I've gotten older, but certainly did affect me for a long time in terms of the depth of connection I had with communities and being quite the opposite of what Pluto usually brings. It was this veil of separation I felt more of, you know?
Yeah, I definitely felt like, yeah, at times I could have related to that. Like, I don't know. I guess, especially with your Aquarius influence, it's like if it's not authentic and real, you weren't interested, and it could be hard to find that,
Mm,
especially when we're younger, because we don't have that same discernment, right, that we do when we're older. Um, but yeah, for me, like, I also think it translates to like unwavering loyalty. Like, I've always been very loyal to like the people I care about, and I think being with like the Scorpio stellium I have in the 11th house plus Pluto and Scorpio in the 11th house, it's like very loyal. Like very loyal to the people I care about. Not to everyone, but to the people that matter to me, definitely.
I mean, it really actually highlights how different planet relationships can affect that Pluto, right? In your 11th house, knowing that you have the stellium there,
Yeah,
um,
there's
can
just
make
all
that
this
energy so much more
Scorpio.
powerful. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I actually did want to mention that a little bit. So the modern ruler of Pluto is Scorpio, and we can definitely see, I think, the similarities between the sign and the planet. um, the traditional ruler is also Mars, so I wonder what
Scorpio.
connections do you make between Pluto and Mars? Well, Mars being the ruler of Scorpio.
I think Mars has to do more with Scorpio's protective nature.
Hmm.
We could be a bit combative, and like I think I read some in some book I was reading, an astrology book. I can't remember which one. It was like this person, the author said, um, the best offense is defense for Scorpio.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, if that makes sense, if you think about that, it makes sense. And so it's like the Mars, I feel, is more like the integrates more like Scorpio's more like self-protective nature and determination
Hmm.
and willpower because Scorpio is very determined. It's a fixed sign. It's taking Mars, but it's fixed. It's not
Mm.
like Aries where it might be a little bit maybe not as methodical, maybe not as strategic, maybe not as consistent and linear. But Scorpio, it's like when we are determined and we have our like eyes on the prize, it's like nothing can stop us. We're very stubborn in that way, kind of like Taurus, but like I think more. Um,
Absolutely.
and I think Pluto uh brings that more the kind of tumultuous side, the attraction to the more taboo topics, the Scorpios. Everyone says that Sagittarius is obsessed with the truth, but I think Scorpio is more obsessed with the truth.
I
Um,
think so. I
and
actually see a lot of,
the investigative nature, the desire to pull things apart and really understand them for what they are. I think that's where Pluto comes in. Um, yeah, I see it. Mars is like the determination, the willpower, the protection, the defense, the guardedness, and then Pluto is more the mystery, the uncovering mysteries, the investigation, yeah, basically that side.
mhm. Right. So Pluto is an incredibly intense, in-depth planet, and we could probably chat about it for hours and hours. But today, the real goal, I think, is to talk about this big transit that we're all going through. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, um, Pluto is moving into Aquarius or has moved into Aquarius. Right, so Pluto is an incredibly interesting planet, and we could go on and on about it. But what we're really here to do, I think, is to chat more about this huge transit we're going through of Pluto in Aquarius. So I wanted to start with maybe chatting a bit about where Pluto has been for the last 20 years or so, which is Capricorn. And I'm curious what comes up for you with Pluto and Capricorn.
Yeah, so with Pluto in Capricorn, it was an interesting transit. It was from around 2008 until 2024. It was 16 years about.
Hmm.
And it's actually very interesting. It was a tumultuous time, I think, in society in the world because Pluto, wants to transform, wants to make big changes, wants to undo. It's really like the planet of undoing, right? And Capricorn is so different from that. It's such an almost an opposite energy, to be honest with you. It like structure, rules, hierarchy, preservation, keeping things intact, legacy, tradition, so to speak. And so when you've got a planet that is so big on transformation, Um, and in a sign that doesn't want to change, there's like a clash, like a power clash for sure. And I feel like we saw that um through like the financial crises of like 2008. Like it was right, that's right, like right around the time when Pluto entered Capricorn was when the financial crisis hit. And it's kind of like our whole banking system, the way loans and all of that. I mean, I'm not in finance, but I know a thing or two. The whole way that system was working clearly, like, you know, had to undergo a change, but like the way we had been doing things had been like stagnant for so long. And then that happened, and that revealed a lot of the holes, right, within our system, right? And just, the technology and AI boom, but the resistance to it at the same time. I feel like during the Pluto and Capricorn, there was more resistance to it. The Occupy Wall Street, the COVID-19, themes of, how much should the state intervene? How much should we allow them to intervene? Like power struggles between authority figures, like and governments and the people. So, um, I don't know. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think, I would add to that by saying a lot of the big sort of structural changes we saw in society was really, Pluto and Capricorn kind of causing the cracks in trust of those systems. I think Pluto has a great way of showing us where transformation's needed, almost to the point where it becomes impossible not to transform. I feel like Pluto pushes you until you don't have a choice. And if, we're looking at a structural or societal level of what that might be, I think it has something to do with breaking our trust in government systems. I think a lot of what was happening during COVID time was this awakening of what's really going on, what's been hidden, and what needs to change. And I think we started to see a little bit of a crack in our trust of state and
Yeah.
government. But, really what I wanted to get into was on a personal level, what do you think Pluto and Capricorn, um, a transit, in contrast to in our natal chart, what do you think that does for us
Like as a society, like as a whole, you mean,
as an individual?
as an individual? Um, I mean, I know like in my case, like, and in your case, it transited our first house.
Right.
Um, so in that case, I think for me, there were a lot of lessons around adopting more self-discipline and being more responsible. Because in my youth, like when I was much younger, like I had issues with that, with being responsible, whether that was with my money, with my schoolwork, with work, like there were some holes there. And I think that Pluto and Capricorn transit kind of showed where people needed to um I guess adopt greater discipline, like self-discipline and responsibility in a certain area of life. Now with the Aquarius transit, it's different because it's kind of showing where do we need to find more freedom and flexibility.
Hmm.
But the Pluto and Capricorn transit was different. I think it was more about discipline, more about creating structure. Um, because that's what Capricorn wants, right?
Hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, on an individual level, I think, you know, keeping the themes of Capricorn, structures, just like how in society it showed us where transformation is needed. I think depending on where it showed up in your life, in your chart, and in which house, I think certain themes, ones that was hidden or and now seen essentially would be what is wrong, what needs fixing, what do I need to go back and redo in terms of structural or foundational things in my life. So for me, in my first house, it had so much to do with identity. I was changing so much that it was difficult for me to grasp who I was at certain points. And in those limbo states between different people, as you're growing into someone else, I think Pluto is really good at putting you in that limbo state. It's very uncomfortable. It's that in between who I am, who I was, and who I'm becoming. And I think I felt very much in that limbo state for many, many years. And what Pluto has done for me, especially now looking back, is I know who I am. And I think that was its purpose for me in my first house. And then quite literally, the first house ruling your appearance, I think I have changed my style. I have changed the way I carry myself, present myself, and even sometimes I feel like it's actually changed my face completely to the point
I
where I don't
know.
recognize old pictures.
I feel like people see pictures of me from like high school, university, and you're like, that's you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, it is. Also, we have Neptune in the first. That could make appearance very changeable as well.
Right, right.
So that's something else to think about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally relate to that of like the not knowing who I was like for so long and trying to figure that out, and my identity was something like, because I don't know, we assign all these superficial things to our identity, like, oh, where you're from, what you like, what's your cultural background. But it's like those matter, but like that they're not the root of it, right? They're not like the core of what your identity is.
Oh no. And Pluto's gonna want you to develop your identity to the point where it's empowering to you in the way you move through the world, which is certainly not where you come from or what language you speak. More importantly, it's do you have that foundation of I know who I am, and therefore I move with confidence, and therefore I carry that empowering or powerful nature that Pluto is asking us to have. So yeah, I think, being in the first house for us, that would have been the effect. But today I really actually wanted to get into each sign. We could go through each sign and talk about where Pluto moving into Aquarius would be in your chart for, I guess, the next 20 years or so.
I think 19, yeah, 18,
Right,
19.
right. So, what
Yeah.
you can sort of expect for the next chapter of your life in terms of the transformations you might go through. And of course, I do want to mention today we're using whole sign houses, so you can really follow this using your rising sign. Izzy and I are Cap rising, so we had Pluto in Capricorn in our first house for a while, and now it has moved to our second house.
Gotta
So,
get
is
that money.
yes, got to get
I
that
please.
bag. All right, so Izzy, I wonder if you can kick us off, beginning with Aries, which puts Pluto in Aquarius in the 11th house. What comes to mind for you?
So people with Aries rising, with Pluto transiting and Aquarius transiting their 11th house, are gonna experience a big shift, I would say, in terms of who they're surrounding themselves with, in terms of their communities. Um, they might build a new community, they might lead a community, they can experience some disappointments in the groups that they're operating in. But they could emerge stronger and with people around them who feel more aligned. It is also about their goals, so it's like there's a lot of energy around like um setting goals, achieving them, and I would say with the Aquarius influence, like setting goals that like reflect your independence rather than what society dictates they should be.
Hmm.
And just really feeling into that, I would say. Just a lot of change around groups and communities and networks and uh goals and aspirations, which, we can't the whole point of the 11th house to me is that we can't do it all by ourselves, right? We can't, like, this whole myth of like the solo success person. It's like, no, like you need a team. You need to work together. You need to collaborate. Whether it's friends, family, co-workers, we can't do everything by ourselves. That's what like this toxic like extreme level of individualism has like made us think. And
Mm,
I think Aquarius, especially being in the 11th house here for people with Aries rising, like that's what they need to understand.
mm.
Um, is that they're they could have a lot of goals and ideas and visions, but it's like it's not for them to just do alone. It's like it's a collective effort.
Yeah, I think when you tell me 11th house, Pluto, I think social influence. And that with the combination of Aquarius, to me, it looks like having some sort of empowerment, powerful authority, or social influence in a place that is quite unique to you. So I think for Aries risings, it's a chapter that looks like finding your special skill, your thing, those things that make you unique and stand out, which I think Aries is so good at, the individualism associated with that, with the sign, that this is a
The
chapter
sense
of,
of self.
yeah, it's a chapter of using that sense of self for social influence and in our communities. And I do want to build on what you said about communities changing. I think the beginning of the transit, at least, might look a lot like noticing that that essence, that thing that makes you you, no longer resonates with certain groups and people. And there can be, periods of isolation, with the only purpose to gain that foundation of identity and who you are, so that you can use it again to enter communities that do align and that you do have social influence in. Um, yeah. So I think just a time of, yeah, community, collaboration, and people having a big impact, and you yourself having an impact on those groups as well.
Yeah.
What about Taurus? So Aquarius is in the 10th house. So Pluto will be transiting the 10th house for Taurus rising. What do you make of that?
Career.
Mm,
Like major changes and shifts in the
hmm.
career. And I've actually got a friend who has sorry Pluto and Aquarius transiting his 10th right now, and he's just like made a major leap in his career already. Um and he had been expressing to me that he had been wanting a change for a while, and it just happened like very naturally, finally, but very naturally. So yeah, big changes in career, um, in business, if the person has a business. Um, uh, I think also like finding careers that give you more freedom in every sense of the word, financial, in terms of having more time, that not having too much burnout. Like I think that is going to be a big theme for um, the Taurus rising people for sure. Big themes, big changes within the career. Um, Maybe a path that feels more aligned. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely agree with you. I would also add that reputation. I think reputation is going to go through a bit of a change here for Taurus rising. And more specifically, I would imagine that Taurus risings might go through a bit of a less curated public persona. I think,
I love that. I love that. I love that. That is so wow, that's amazing. Yes, I love that.
yeah, I think there's going to be this sense of undoing in terms of public reputation for Taurus risings in the best way. I see, because, Aquarius is this sort of liberation. The theme that comes up for me would be freedom over perfection. It's about really embracing the messy and the imperfectionistic quality that is sometimes associated with earth signs, particularly a fixed earth sign like Taurus. where there's a little bit more mobility and change and embracing a bit of the messy.
And not having to, I want to add to that, and not having like to hide behind like a curated public persona because like I feel like with Taurus risings, like I feel like they might want to give off a very specific impression, but they actually like can be into things that are so creative and so interesting, but that maybe go against like,
The curated.
professionalism and LinkedIn. And I just think of LinkedIn, it's such like a, yeah.
Yeah.
And I really, yeah, I see what you mean with like kind of not being like afraid to incorporate who they really are in their public persona and understanding that their true self is actually like a gift. Their true traits are actually a gift and their interests, and that they don't have to hide behind a mask.
The freedom is more beautiful than the perfection of something they would maybe normally consider beautiful, which is
Yeah.
tends to be more curated. Yeah. So what about Gemini? Gemini puts Aquarius and Pluto in the ninth house.
I think, yeah, those with Gemini risings, we could expect, I guess, that like learning, they may transform through certain learning experiences, especially like relating to research or like studying, maybe studying abroad. Um, Something in the academic world, like I'm seeing maybe like, going back to school after a very long time of not having studied, and maybe getting more into just learning more, reading more books, learning more about things like astrology, human design, numerology, like different, maybe even different religions, like exploring their worldview more. I think
Mm.
their worldview could transform. It could also be through travel as well, that their worldview transforms through travel. I think they're gonna go through major changes of like, maybe perhaps like, yeah, like moving abroad and stuff like that. But just kind of questioning their beliefs and the way they see the world and looking at it through another lens, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think very much ninth house Pluto is a transformation of beliefs, which often does involve certain education. I think it's also very much associated with teaching. So it might be the start or the learning of something that you later teach, or something that you have been teaching that you grow or develop in some ways. Because, ninth house is really higher learning. So it's always adding to that information or that education you already have. Of course, with Pluto there, you could be going in completely unpredictable directions. But of course, that higher learning aspect where you're adding to what you already know. And of course, with the travel, I think some sort of transformation in terms of travel, whether it's traveling more often, traveling less often, the means of travel changing. Perhaps you find yourself in Europe and you're taking the train around Europe, whereas before you were flying. Or maybe you're going on more cruises, with quite a literal change in the method of transportation that you choose to connect with other cultures. And that, I guess, would be the last point I would make is the sense of connecting with people and places with a different worldview or culture than your own, and that being very transformational. So perhaps this is the chapter where you immerse into cultures that teach you something that you really haven't really thought of before, or that opens your mind in a way that maybe you haven't had done before.
Yeah.
How about Cancer? Cancer in the eighth house. Well, Aquarius in the eighth house.
I feel like this could be one of the most profound changes, but maybe not necessarily outwardly visible, because the eighth house is very, very deep. it's very much kind of what's hidden from us.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of like behind the scenes stuff, kind of with the eighth house. Um, but a big theme that I like to talk about with the eighth house that I think people overlook a lot is vulnerability. And I actually have quite a few Cancer risings in my life, and all of them have been struggling with this theme of vulnerability in the last years, I feel. And I think this is going to be a situation where they transform like on a psychological level,
Mhm.
where they might go through like a dark night of the soul and um it's hard to explain what I want to say, but like, or they just have this like rude awakening um of where they've just been afraid to be themselves and kind of listen to what they need. And I think it's just going to be a period of intense inner awakening and learning to be more vulnerable with those who are close with them, so that those who are close with them can actually help them and work with them, not against them. Um, I just think that, yeah, a lot around vulnerability, intense psychological transformation, kind of going through certain awakenings. It's like going to be I feel like a period of inner awakening that may not be outwardly seen, but it's very inwardly felt.
Mhm.
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the eighth house is quite a strange house to explain. It can only be felt because we all have an eighth house and we've all felt it. But certainly the eighth house would also have to do with shadows. So I think some of that inner transformation you're talking about is maybe becoming quite aware of the things we don't like about ourselves, maybe the taboo things that we haven't yet looked at, the things that maybe we don't want to look at, that comes to light. And there is this thing that happens when we become aware of both our light and dark aspects. And by that, I mean the things we like and the things that perhaps are not our favorite about ourselves. And what happens is integration. And I think that's that transformation, that sort of soul journey you might be pointing to as well, where those things come together and there's a more complete internal understanding and version of ourselves where all is accepted as well, which I guess would be the final goal. But yeah, for sure, there's that inner, deep, deep, profound change that comes with the eighth house. I think it also has to do with facing our fears of vulnerability, as you said. You know, whereas the 12th house is actual fears, I think the eighth house is that fear of being seen. And I think when Pluto goes through there, we're seen by ourselves and by others. And by relation, we also see others and our environment more clearly. So I think when all those factors come together, um, Cancer risings can expect quite a deep transformation, you know, similar
Yeah.
to the ninth house and worldview, but so much more as it pertains to the self and how we see ourselves in the world. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
agreed.
So, how about Leo? Leo would put Aquarius in the seventh house.
Oh, yeah. So interesting. So I think this is a transit that people tend to get very scared of. Pluto in the seventh. But it does not automatically mean like divorce or breakup. It can, because it just indicates typically transformation relating to our one-to-one relationships. Could be romantic, could be platonic. But the close relationships, the close one-to-one relationships. So this could really look like, like I said, perhaps maybe breakups, divorces, but also just like transforming through your partnership. It could actually even mean marriage. It
A
just
deepening
means
of
a
connection.
deepening of connection, taking it to the next level,
Mhm.
taking your connection to the next level, um, and just transforming through close relationships with others. Like maybe during this time, uh, the person meets people who have a very profound impact on them. It's not necessarily to be feared. Um, my mom is a Cancer rising, so Capricorn and Pluto and Capricorn was transiting her seventh house, and she's still married to my dad. Like nothing happened, Like I saw this creator on Instagram talking about like how all the Cancer risings went through divorce because Capricorn was transiting their seventh house. Pluto and Capricorn was transiting their seventh house, and I was like, not everyone. I don't know. I don't like absolutes in astrology. I am an evolutionary astrologer, so I don't like the prescriptive view. I know some astrologers maybe do. I don't think you do either.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. I mean, the ways in which transits and planets can vary
Manifest.
and change
Yeah.
so much from person to person, it's so hard to say this is the way it's going to be. And I think a lot of people online, um, they use that as like clickbait to get more views. But the truth is, there's no ways that we can predict something like that for all Cancer risings. In fact, if there is a divorce of some sort, it would be very much from that empowered stance of choice. So if that's not something you want, most likely it's not in the cards for you. More likely would be some sort of transformation and change. And I think what does happen is, when Pluto's in our seventh house, we start to look at our relationships more deeply. We start to look at our connections, our partnerships, not just romantic in general. It might be a time where you enter into a very successful partnership in work or
Yeah, like a
collaboration
business
in creative
partnership.
projects. Yeah. So this could be both positive or difficult, but the bottom line is there will be transformation where Pluto is. So it might be that sense of as you look into the connections and the relationships you currently have, you might find where there is lacking, where there is too much. This could be a time where you identify ways where you are codependent or because Pluto wants to empower you. So if you are in a deeply codependent relationship, that might be highlighted, and there might be a sense of loss associated with that. Sometimes our partners pull away from us as a sign of, that codependence that we feel. So there's a lot of things that could happen, and certainly not just divorce. Most of the time, it's to empower whoever's going through the transit, to use those relationships, those partnerships, and collaborations in a more positive way in their lives.
Yeah, I agree.
Next, we have our Virgos. What would you say about Pluto in Aquarius in the sixth house?
This could really look like the way I see it, like a person's routine, like their day-to-day life, the way that it looks,
Hmm.
um like just their schedule, the way they work could change a lot, just like their day-to-day life could change a lot. So it's like I feel like this could manifest in a lot of like in a variety of ways, honestly. Like it could look like getting a new job, having a new commute, like kind of changing up your health and your exercise and maybe adopting new regimens. Um, it could look like it is also the house of service, but I think this is what's really misunderstood about the sixth house. I think it's like a lot of it is about balancing like service to others and service to yourself. So like maybe like a sixth house Pluto transit could kind of um shed light on that, on where a person has been, too focused on serving others or where they've maybe been neglecting themselves or vice versa. I do think that that is a way that it could manifest too. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I would add to the workplace and say, the sixth house can often also represent our colleagues and the people that work beneath us. By beneath, I just mean in hierarchical workplaces, right? So it could be a time where people are getting employees. It could be a time where you're looking for empowerment, which looks different for everyone. It could be starting your own business. It could be working your way up, becoming some sort of authority in your current place of work, or gaining more responsibility over others. As you mentioned, that whole service factor, I think, has very much to do with, um, how we work and relate to others in our workspaces. As you mentioned about the daily life, I often find that people with Pluto in the sixth house or transiting through the sixth house, they find deeper ways to connect with themselves through routine. So it might be the chapter where start meditating as your daily routine, or start a spiritual practice that makes you feel more deeply connected to yourself or to anything spiritual or to your beliefs. So, yeah, those daily routines becoming a little bit more in depth, more intense, more focused on connection. And then, yeah, with regards to health, I definitely agree with you. The sixth house is about health, so it might be a time where you are going through health changes. It might be a time where your body's changing and you need different things, different diets. It might be a time where you experiment with different ways to take care of yourself, whether that's for your physical health or mental health, or psychologically. So all of those, I think, are big forces of change and empowerment during this chapter if you're having this transit in your sixth house. And I wanted to add something else, but it seems to have left my mind. But yeah, certainly daily routine and health would be affected. Um, yeah. How about moving on to Libra, which would put Pluto in the fifth house?
So I think this is a time, this would be a time, like a period of time when, I mean, the fifth house rules a lot of things, right? Creativity, dating, sex, um, vices, our vices. Um, and so, like I said, like I think I really like how you mentioned before, and I've been mentioning throughout as well, like that Pluto could really shed a light on where we might have like not so favorable habits. And so, and like Libra, it's interesting because Libra in general, including Libra rising, just any Libra placement, like could be guilty of indulging in comforts. Um, and it can be a sign that has a lot of vices that struggles with this, whether it's drugs, food, sex, like, it could be that could be an issue. And so this could be a period of time where um that is maybe highlighted and there could be kind of like a rude awakening with that. It could also be a time where on a more positive manifestation could be around creativity, like exploring one's creativity, um, and immersing themselves more in creative activities and kind of redefining their creativity and just expanding it. Um, and could even be a time where people there's something related to children, maybe childbirth. Uh, I feel like a Jupiter fifth house, Pluto fifth house could often point to having a child. Not always, not necessarily, but it's a long-term transit, so so many things could play out, right? So many things could happen.
Mm, absolutely. I often associate the fifth house with basically just pleasure. Anything we enjoy,
Enjoyment,
yeah,
yeah.
anything that brings pleasure, whether it be through the senses, through the mind. So I find that, people going through transformational transits with the fifth house, they tend to get new hobbies. And there might be a period of time where they no longer relate to the old things they used to enjoy. This can be quite a difficult time, I think, for some people when you no longer find the joy or the happiness from things that used to bring you so much. So, you might go through this transition of, well, what do I enjoy? And in that exploration, find new hobbies, new things to enjoy, new ways to enjoy your senses and your pleasure. And I like what you said about creativity, new ways to create, new ways to express yourself into the world. It's also related to dating. So I would imagine Pluto in the fifth house would bring a bit of intensity to dating. Fifth house, to me at least, is usually quite a light-hearted energy, joy and creativity and dating, romance. But this Pluto transit can bring some intensity there. And it's really asking you to explore your joy and your pleasure more deeply and to prioritize it. So this could be a great time to explore sexually, to get to know your body and what brings you pleasure, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely agree. Hard agree.
All right. So next would be Scorpio, which puts Pluto in the fourth house. What comes to mind?
So I could, I mean, I haven't gone through a Pluto fourth house transit, but I've been going through very difficult fourth house transits over the last few years. Chiron's been sitting there.
Okay.
Saturn just, I think, yeah, retrograded, like it was out of it and now it's back there. And it's about to be back in my fourth, I believe. Neptune as well. It's been, yeah, a tumultuous time.
Hmm.
But I just think anytime there is maybe a malefic like Pluto, like in the fourth house, um, the person's like sense of home and maybe how they relate to the location where they're living could kind of be threatened. And it doesn't have to be physically like losing your home to a natural disaster, God forbid. But it could even just honestly look more something like I live in this country or I live in this city and it's not resonating with me anymore. And might be this need to like up and leave and uproot you when you're whether you live alone or your whole family or whoever. I've seen that a lot. When I read about people experiencing a Pluto fourth house transit, I feel like that comes up a lot. Um, Kind of redefining home, maybe not resonating with your location anymore. Um, Actually, a lot of my astrocartography clients have had this transit, and it makes a lot of sense.
Mm,
It makes so much sense. I've worked with a lot of Scorpio risings, and before that, Libra risings, and that's whose Pluto was transiting the fourth before. So it makes a lot of sense. It tracks.
mm.
Um, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree that movement is very often associated with this kind of transit in the fourth house, but it could also just be renovating. So changing your space quite deeply, a deep renovation, building on things like that. But I also associate the fourth house with early childhood home. So the connection with, the caregivers, your early caregivers in life, can definitely come up during these transits. And because it's Pluto, there's again this sense of reevaluating that relationship. And of course, like most of us, childhood trauma can come up, very much associated with that feeling of home and that feeling of safety, which Pluto often comes in to, as you say, snatch it away from us. As you said, what did you say? You said threaten us. There we go. So
Yeah.
that can also apply, I think, to our sense of safety because home can sometimes be more than physical and our early safety, feelings of safety. So I do think it can be a house where trauma comes up, obviously with the purpose of healing, with reevaluating our relationships with our caregivers, transforming those relationships. And, it can look a little
Yeah, a lot of
daunting.
family stuff can come up. A lot. I
Absolutely.
know someone who's going through this transit right now, and yeah, a lot of family stuff.
Mm,
A lot of like reevaluating the relationship that you have to them.
mm.
Who makes you feel safe is a question that people with this transit might find themselves asking.
Absolutely. People can feel or not feel like home just as much as our physical space. So that's definitely a theme that comes up. And I think, there's this sense of reevaluating those relationships almost as if a child becomes an adult. It's a meeting of who I've become as a person in this current time and how this current person relates to my primary caregivers rather than the child that was in that situation. So I do think a lot of that comes up. Depending on childhood, that analysis can be as deep or as big as needed, and as far as Pluto is going to want to take you to meet that point of transformation and to overcome any of those difficulties that are still sort of, causing you to act in your shadow self in your daily life or in your relationships, home space now. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So next we got our Sagittarius babies, which would be third house Pluto.
Oof, I feel like mindset, mentality,
Mm,
the way you think could undergo such profound changes during this transit. Um, the way you look at situations, the way you perceive life in general, because it is really the house of like communication, thinking, the mind. I also have found that people going through this transit, like it also does rule, like the third house also does deal with your like local community, your like immediate environment. So certain pe
neighbors.
certain people um might that are around you a lot, whether just through convenience, just because they're kind of close by physically, in proximity, may start to like not resonate with you anymore. Um, and there could just be a bit of like a highlighting of like maybe the imbalances in those relationships.
Mm,
Um, you know, um, I think, but I think it especially the way I see it, it could really affect a person's mindset. It could really make them change the way that they think. Um, they could be doing a lot of work on themselves in that kind of capacity. Um, but I do really think a lot of it could highlight like certain imbalances or where things are off in terms of those relationships, like in terms of your local community. Maybe that place doesn't resonate with you anymore. Maybe that neighborhood doesn't resonate with you anymore. Um, as I think like Pluto shows like it pushes us to grow, it pushes us to transform, and it's going to push us maybe away from people and situations that aren't serving us, or just if even if it's not pushing us away, it's going to push us towards a better relationship with those people and those, that place or whatever.
mm. Yeah, and I think the third house also represents siblings. So I think siblings would be part of that group. It might be a time where your siblings have a higher impact on you, perhaps helping you in some ways, or the opposite,
They
moving you
might they
further
might
away.
be they might be going through something, like the sibling could be really going through something.
Yeah, that's something I think that's also important in astrology is that sometimes, depending on the house, what we're witnessing is these huge transformations in the people around us, So, um, and I want to say, just with regards to people, that very often, Pluto might be highlighting issues of addiction or psychological trauma or things that we don't often want to look at. So, those might be the themes that we see coming up in ourselves and also in the people around us. Um, but yeah, like you said, I would completely agree. And I would add that, um, our process of thinking is even different. You know, it would be going through a transformation, the way in which we come to conclusions, not just the ideas and the thoughts, but the whole process. Um, and again,
Even learning the way we learn, the way we study, the way it could be a period where the person goes into like a PhD, like very, very deep research.
mm,
Um,
or learning
yeah,
a language, you know, associated to Mercury, it might be a time where you write more. You know, with Mercury, writing is quite prominent. So it might be a time where you go in depth in your writing or journal more frequently, or are able to express yourself better through writing. So there's a lot of, you know, possibilities with Mercury.
definitely.
Yeah. All right. So Capricorn, which is very close to home for us, because we are Capricorn risings ourselves.
Ah, that we're up to Capricorn. That's right.
Yes. So second house. What can we look
Oh
forward
my God. Money. Money changes. No, literally
to? Yeah,
finances,
literally.
wealth, money. This could be a time where I think building something, building something, transforming our approach to money, how we like our mindset around it, our relationship to money, our relationship to abundance, to receiving,
How we make
um,
our money.
how we make our money. And I think with Aquarius being here, it's like more financial freedom, maybe more remote, making money remotely
Yeah, technology.
through entrepreneurship online. Um, and with especially our as Capricorn risings, we were talking about this the other day. Uranus and Gemini is transiting our sixth of work, and Gemini is very techy, kind of, too.
Uranus
Uranus
represents the
and
internet
Gemini,
and technology.
yeah. So it's like a lot of people with Capricorn risings could have, and actually do know quite a few Capricorn risings who match this, like could have gotten into remote work very early on, or like when it was kind of just becoming a thing. I know I'm one of those people too, as a Capricorn rising, and it's just now it's really like building kind of a certain legacy financially through entrepreneurship, through building something that's your own, through the internet, and just kind of unlocking more sources of income and getting a bit more creative and innovative.
Hmm. Yeah. You know, about making money, I think that wealth and abundance looks different for everyone. I think it's very much about material security. So going through a bit of a redefinition of what that material security looks like to you, how much you need and how much you want, right? And again, like you said, something of our own, something that gives us that power over our finances, you know, and entrepreneurship, it makes sense because you work, you earn. You work, you earn. It's up to you, right? Which it looks a
And
lot different to working for others.
yeah, and to add to that, like it is also the house of our values and our value system. So kind of tying into what you just said about like what does abundance and all of that mean for us, like there's different types of quote unquote currency, right? Like there's like social currency, there's like material currency, but some people value a type of currency over others, and I think it's about reevaluating what that means. Like, would I rather have more money or more time? Would I rather have more time to be with the people I love and care about, or am I more solo? Like, what do we value? What's important to us? What really matters when it comes down to it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, the second house also represents our resources, and some of that can be within ourselves. So I think it's also an exploration of our self-worth. So it's a chapter where you are working on that self-esteem and you're trying to get to a place where you see yourself clearly in terms of your own value, what you add to others' lives, what you're creating in your work, what is the value in what you're putting out into the world, I think is also very much associated to that resource aspect that we find with the second house. Um, but yeah, absolutely money, money. Second house is definitely got that theme. Alrighty, next is Aquarius, which is
Oof.
interesting. First house. Um, so the first thing I actually wanted to note before we get into it is that Aquarius is actually at a fall in a Pluto, Aquarius in Pluto. You know what I mean? It's not very excited to be there, right? It's not exactly the energies we would say are very harmonious. But what would you say about Pluto and Aquarius in the first house?
Um, I mean, I think it's a lot. I'm just thinking a lot about like independence, defining who you are, um, redefining who you are, like getting a grasp on your identity, as an individual, examining your role as an individual versus in the collective, because those are huge Aquarian themes.
Mhm.
Um, and just kind of living life, I think, in a more like an apologetic way, because I feel like Aquarius people with like heavy Aquarian energy, like yourself, like I feel like people really try to put labels on them and put them in a box, and Aquarian type people just can't be molded into anything. And I
Mm,
think that's like a huge beauty of Aquarius placements. And I think this is really Aquarius rising people's like time to really, or just like Aquarius placements in general, like to really, um, even reevaluate like their self-worth and their relationship to their identity, and their role in society. Um, you know, um, as Aquarian energy is it's very naturally going against the grain of society, so they struggle with that as is. But now that there's Pluto transiting in Aquarius in their first house, it's like it they're really kind of w like waking up to certain realizations. I think it's a difficult time, but also very, very much needed.
mm.
What do you want to add?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. I guess I would add a little bit about how, you know, Pluto and Aquarius, Pluto's really going to amplify that Aquarius energy. And one thing about Aquarius is it doesn't fit in anywhere or everywhere. So it's this sense of amplifying maybe isolation at certain parts in this chapter, or coming across as that lovable weirdo we all know Aquarius to be, amplifying those weird, I was going to say queer, why not? Maybe that too. Um, eccentric,
Quirky.
quirky, all of these would be amplified, right? So with that comes this sense of I'm not for everybody. And depending on the rest of your chart, this can be kind of difficult to get your head around. But with Pluto there, it's kind of unavoidable. So it's that sense of choosing yourself, your truth, who you believe you are and who you're becoming and how you project yourself over having people like you, having people accept you at all times, because it's not really a time for that. This is a time where your people will find you and the people that aren't for you are not going to be there. So it's
Yeah,
really,
the people, the situations, all of it. Um, I think they'll be shown that, even more so than some of the other sides, for sure.
absolutely. Okay, so we have come to our final sign, Pisces, which puts Pluto in the 12th house.
Oof, it could feel like 12th house placements in general, 12th house transits, they could feel heavy.
Yeah.
It could feel very heavy. Um, I guess with this one, it's like a lot of messages from the unconscious mind that could come to the surface over the years. Could be hard. It's like it could look like trauma resurfacing. It could look like just really tapping in. Like I think it's really important for Pisces risings to like really tap in spiritually, maybe through meditation, um, and to receive important messages. Um, but a lot could happen around their spirituality, um, even just their faith in life, in life, and if they're religious, if they believe in God, in the universe, whatever. Like, uh, I feel like this transit can activate a lot of things that are, again, similar to the eighth house one, that are like below the surface. Um, could highlight certain mental health struggles that a person has been having. Can highlight, this could also be a period where through certain periods of this transit, like people, the person could feel quite isolated and alone because the 12th house does deal with themes of isolation. Um, but I feel like this one could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. Maybe you see it in a different way. I don't know.
Yeah, I want to get a little bit away from the doom and gloom because everything you said is absolutely true. But I do think there are some positivities. So I wanted to add to what you said about tapping in. Pisces risings, this is your time to discover and curate your spiritual gifts because we know you have them. If you're a Pisces rising, you got something, whether it's heightened intuition, whether it's as extreme as clairvoyance.
I think it's also like the rarest rising sign. I feel like I read that somewhere.
Oh, I have not heard that, but that would check
I
out.
barely know any. I barely know any. Like seriously, I think it's very rare.
Mm. I have an incredible client who's a Pisces rising, so I at least know one.
One of my best friends is a Pisces rising. Shout out to Chris Noel. Check out his music, Divine Wrath.
I love it. But yeah, so it's a time now to discover your psychic gifts, your spiritual gift. Maybe it's a time where you are incredibly good at meditation, able to tap in very easily. The veil is thin. The 12th house are the things that are unseen, as you mentioned, Izzy, about the subconscious. So all of that coming to light for sure. But as the veil is thin, so is our connection to the universe, to God, to our own spiritual gifts, to our own intuition. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if a Pisces rising starts to get a little bit more anxious than usual. Fears do come up. There can be a sense of underlying
Heaviness.
heaviness and fear, like this slight anxiety going on underneath the surface, which would need to be explored. It might be a time for you to face those fears and to put yourself in uncomfortable positions to overcome some of those fears. Um, but back to the more positive stuff, it's also a great time to start therapy. It would be incredibly powerful to go to therapy and to discover your subconscious. The energy is facilitating that. So it's a great time of healing, a great time of deep psychological understanding. The 12th house does represent, hidden structural societal things such as prisons. So it could be a time where you start working in prisons, start working in rehabilitation, find intense interest in things like psychology, prisons, taboo. Um, it's also for me a house of sexual exploration. Those unconscious drives, those hidden desires can come to light, and it can actually be a lot of fun, I think, to explore that.
Yeah, it's a little off topic, but I'm I'm so obsessed with like 12th house synastry. I feel like it's so misunderstood.
Hmm.
People put a lot of doom and gloom on it, but I feel like that's not necessarily what it is.
Mm.
But
Incredibly powerful house.
yeah,
Yeah, if
and
you
a
have
lot
Mars
of
in
a
your 12th
lot with
house, you're good. And I think
Yeah.
that's what this is. It's to master the 12th house. And once you do that, especially as a Pisces rising, if you can overcome any addictions, overcome any unconscious drives, bad or maladaptive patterns, all of that coming to the surface and to be removed, unstoppable force by the end of it, I believe. um, yeah, so I mean, that's sort of the last sign of the zodiac. That's all the houses. I would say, just to kind of conclude that, to really notice, the house topics that feel more intense, those topics that feel unavoidable. Those are the things that Plato, Pluto's
Plato.
Pluto in me, that Pluto is, really working on in your life and in your chart and in your lessons that you have here to learn.
Agreed.
All right. So I was thinking, just to wrap up today, perhaps we could reflect a little bit on Pluto's lessons in general. If you had anything that came up for you in terms of your personal lessons or lessons you've seen in others that Pluto's brought.
I think like so on a, I guess in a more general sense, Pluto has to do with transformation, right? And I think some of us, depending on our charts and just who we are, might be more comfortable with transformation, whereas others might prefer to stay in comfort, and to stay with what's familiar. And I think Pluto is, the house that it's in, which reflects the area of life that it's kind of triggering, that it's awakening, I would say, um, is gonna show like where we're gonna be pushed out of our comfort zone and pushed to grow, basically grow or die, whether we like it or not. Um, you know, uh, you and I were talking about as Cap Risings having it in our 11th house. It's been groups, like navigating our roles in groups. And there's been periods where I've really shied away from groups and building community out of fear of whether it's rejection or just not resonating or power imbalances that could occur. But it's like Pluto's always going to push you in situations that are going to trigger you, and it's going to act as a catalyst for growth. And so if you're a person that you know who you are, if you're a person who is like you're really stuck in your comfort zone and you're really afraid to take risks and afraid to try new things and do things differently and approach things differently, Pluto is gonna force you to do it. Pluto is gonna It's like that's the lesson of Pluto, that we can't always remain the same, that transformation is essential to, sorry, I've got something in my eye. Transformation is essential to growth, and it's inevitable, and change is inevitable. Um, and yeah, that's to me the overarching lesson of Pluto, and learning that losing something too, because it has to do with loss, that losing something isn't always necessarily bad. Like you lose something, but you always gain something else.
Yeah,
It's the
beautifully.
tower, the tarot card, the tower. Like things fall apart to be built up again better, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Personally, uh, Pluto always felt like quite a distant planet, literally, obviously. But I mean, from my mind, it was always a little bit more difficult for me to understand. It was only when I came to Spain and I have my rising sign in Scorpio, my relocated chart, that I started to connect a little bit
And
more.
Pluto's in your first house here too.
Exactly. Yes. So I don't know, I've kind of witnessed that. It's been a huge thing in my relocated chart. And I would say that Pluto has taught me what makes me feel sexy, what makes me feel expressed, um, what gives me depth, How do I find depth in the things around me, in the people around me, in myself? How can I be more authentic? What does that look like? How how can I deal with not being liked and not being for everyone? And Pluto's taught me all of that, and it's taught me finally that all of that is okay, no matter whatever answer I come up with. And there's this sense of with Pluto, this power in the discomfort. The discomfort is where you figure it out. It's where that empowered stance comes from, that
Because
comes with
it's pushing
authenticity.
you. It's
Yeah.
pushing you towards something.
But something that I think is not always spoken about is how fucking good it feels. Pluto feels good. It feels like, of course, there's times of suffering and there's discomfort. I am not discarding anything we've already said up to this point, but it's like a giant cosmic orgasm. It's incredible. When you come out the other side, whatever it may be, whether it's a transformation, a lesson, a moment of discomfort and vulnerability, a moment of stepping into your authenticity, whatever it is, it feels incredible. So I think that whatever Pluto's bringing, you, me, or our listeners, is definitely going to be, as much as it is difficult, incredibly gratifying and pleasurable. If that's, I mean, does that sound like a possibility to you that Pluto can bring such intense ecstasy?
So what you're saying about Pluto, that it's like it's almost like you love the discomfort. I think, or you grow to love it like over time. Maybe not immediately. Maybe in the beginning it
I
could
mean,
feel re
I'm sorry, I mean more what comes after the discomfort. It's
I know,
never
wait.
constant discomfort.
But
It's
but
never like
but but what I mean, what I'm getting at is kind of that like the discomfort gives you the confidence to know that you are evolving.
it's true.
The
And when you're
comfort, it
not,
gives you the confidence to know like that you don't need reassurance necessarily, that you don't need to be, in your case, you don't need to be for everyone. And yes, like while you're going through that phase of feeling that discomfort in the, especially initially, of course, it could be a bit like it could be difficult, it could be daunting, it could be challenging, but it gives you that confidence because you know you could stand on your 2 feet and you could stand in your truth, you
yeah,
know.
I love the word that you used, confidence. That's exactly it. It's so incredibly powerful, and it is so subtly developed through every single discomfort that, yeah, you're right. As you make it through the first discomfort, the second one doesn't feel as bad. So if you think about an almost 20-year transit, by the end of it, there's that confidence you've built up that makes you feel unstoppable. And I think, yeah, it's exactly what I'm talking about, that ecstasy that Pluto brings when you've overcome something, when you've faced a fear, when you've been brave enough
It's
to lace your
empowering.
boots.
You feel
Yes,
empowered. You feel
yes,
empowered.
absolutely. Okay, so I was wondering, what advice would you give someone, anyone, that is being or feeling quite affected by Pluto?
Basically, you gave it away. I mean, you have to embrace the discomfort. You
Hmm.
have to embrace the discomfort, um, and understand why it's necessary for your growth and for you to be the best version of you. Not to say there's anything wrong with anyone, but it's just like we are all on a journey. And Pluto is an important part of the journey. Um,
Hmm.
and to understand that it's okay to go through times of feeling really heavy emotionally, that we can't always feel lightness because if we don't feel heaviness, like how will we know the contrast? You know?
It's true. Duality.
You need duality. You need duality. It's just part of the universe. It's a law. It's a universal law, right? So,
Absolutely. You cannot experience joy without deep sadness. It doesn't
yeah,
happen.
you won't know what one or the other feels like if you don't
Exactly.
experience it.
Hmm. Yeah, and I would add to what you're saying and say that element of detachment. Learn how to let go. The quicker you learn how to let go, the quicker Pluto's going to be your friend, and the quicker you're going to pass through difficult times. I think that the mere act of detachment and letting go is an important skill in life. Pluto really wants you to learn that. It teaches you when to fight, and it teaches you when to let go. And I think that's an important part of the lesson. But in terms of practical advice, I don't know if you would agree, but I would say simple things like journaling, bringing awareness to what you're learning, thinking, passing through, I think can be really helpful, to have some sort of concrete idea of what you're working on, what you're learning. Um, Depending on the house as well, therapy's great. Pluto's really going to help facilitate in whatever house to go deeper, to go into the subconscious, to go to that deeper foundational
Yeah.
level of
It's
transformation.
and escapism won't work with Pluto. Escapism always backfires with Pluto, and I think it's important to realize where we might have certain escapist
Hmm.
tendencies when dealing with Pluto, because it is a catalyst. So like I said, it's gonna push us in that direction. It's
Hmm.
so powerful.
Mm. And, just based on what you're saying as well, I would say power struggle. Be aware of the power struggles you're partaking in your life and let that go. I don't think it's a time for power struggle. I mean, what would your analysis be of that? Do you think it might be a time to actually be more bold and
Mm, it's I think it's all dependent on each individual situation, but I think Pluto might push people to evaluate like and look for like where there could be imbalances and power struggles with a certain in terms of your relationships or whether that's at work or romantic or platonic or whatever. Um, it's just important to be aware of that and I think learn like about manipulation, about gaslighting, about um, certain trifling behaviors, you know.
yeah,
Again, we Pluto does not reward escapism, it does not reward ignorance. You have to be on your shit with Pluto,
it's true. It's
if
true.
that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think there might be a time where it's you need to be bold, but I would be wary of power struggles. As soon as you have to struggle for the power, I feel like that's the opposite of what Pluto's asking you to do. Does
No,
that
it's
make
like
sense?
it's kind of know more when to walk away and when to like you know that someone isn't worth being in your life or isn't worth your time or attention.
Hmm.
I would say instead of like getting into it with them,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. And maybe I would build on that and remind people to not play or be the victim. I don't think I don't think Pluto takes very kindly to victim
It
behavior.
wants us to rise above.
Yes, absolutely.
Like the Scorpio analogy from the scorpion to the phoenix rising from the ashes, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's really going to push you to do that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, best of luck. The great news is that we're all going through some sort of Pluto transit at this time. Depending on the house, we're all being challenged and transformed in different ways. So, speak to each other, rely on each other, and know that everybody's going through something, right?
Yeah, and we'd love to hear about your experience with Pluto in general, with your Pluto transits. If you want to share, leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. If you've enjoyed this episode, of course, like, subscribe, all that cool stuff. And we'll see you again in episode 4. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Moon Me, an astrology podcast. We hope our insights have inspired you to explore your own path. Join us next time as we dive deeper into the cosmos with Roxy and Izzy.